Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, the chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. And today, we have a special edition of the show where we recapture the finest moments in commentary, bringing you the best of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz.
Let's get straight to our first guest, Governor Mike Huckabee. Mike is a former presidential candidate as well as a well-known talk show host and author. Let's hear from him.
Well, Alan, I'm at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, and this is about my fifth trip here since December of last year. There have been some extraordinary things happening, as you well know, things that I think are significant for Israel and for the relationship that Israel has with the United States. Obviously, the moving of the embassy. You and I were both here for that momentous moment, and it was surreal. But I also think it's opened a whole new chapter for the Middle East, and it's given a new hope and a new platform to build upon. Totally opposite the thinking of many people who thought that it would bring disruption to the Middle East. On the other hand, it's really kind of settled the issue of Jerusalem. And it's made it very clear that Jerusalem is not going to be a divided city. It will be the ancestral, indigenous, and historical capital of the Jewish state. And I think that's an important thing to settle. I would love to get your comments on if you think that the move by the president, after all these years of promises, finally getting to the point of bringing the embassy home to Jerusalem, has proven to be a good thing. And then on a personal note, I'd love to get your thoughts, Alan, on what can be done to help restore some civility to the political climate in the U.S. I'm watching it with my own daughter, thrown out of a restaurant in Virginia, not because of something she did or said or because she acted up or behaved improperly, but simply because she went there to eat and she worked for Donald Trump, and that was unacceptable to the owner. And I know you're experiencing some of this, even at Martha's Vineyard, a place you've been to many, many times, and yet now completely different atmosphere. So would love to hear your thoughts on how to return some level of civility back to our political climate and just bring a simple sense of manners back.
Well, thank you, Mike. Mike's a great American and a great, great friend of Israel, who I've known for many years. I've been privileged to be on his show, and I really appreciate your two questions. First, I think that recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's eternal capital was long overdue. Virtually every modern American president promised it, and only this president carried it out. I was honored to be there with my grandson. I do think it was absolutely essential, following the despicable Security Council resolution engineered by President Obama, to declare Jewish Jerusalem, that is the Western Wall, the Plaza, the access roads to Hebrew University and Hadassah Hospital, and the Jewish Quarter, to be illegally occupied territory. It was that horrible decision that changed the status quo of Jerusalem, and it was essential for the president to change the status quo back and to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. I met with President Trump, and I urged him to do that, and the reason I gave him was the UN resolution, which was designed to tie the hands of President Trump. It was, remember, it was passed in December of 2016, when President Trump had already been elected and was president-elect, and it was calculated to tie his hands. And I thought it was essential for President Trump to untie his own hands and to resolve the issue of Jerusalem. And it's amazing that when American Jews and others were asked under President Obama, should the embassy be moved, the vast majority said yes. But when Trump moved the embassy, a very substantial number of American Jews said no, they didn't favor it because anything Trump does is bad, anything Obama did was good. Israel must remain a bipartisan issue. We can never allow it to become an issue in which we assess the results based on who did it and who didn't do it. I do think that settling the issue of Jerusalem has turned out to be a very good thing. We haven't heard very much criticism from the Sunni Arab countries Yes, the Palestinians have said they refuse to come to the bargaining table, but they'll never get a state unless they come to the bargaining table. So I think it was a good thing. There are many parts of policies of President Trump that I don't support. His immigration policies, his attitudes toward the people at Charlottesville, some of his tax and other policies, but moving the embassy is something I completely support. And that's why I made it my point to be there when the official embassy opened. As far as the second question, it's such a disturbing question. I'm publishing an op-ed today or tomorrow, simply giving the emails that I have gotten as a result of me defending not Donald Trump, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but defending the president against improper violations of civil liberties and defending the Constitution. I have been threatened with all kinds of things. One email threatened to have a woman set me up and falsely accuse me. Another one threatened to put a bullet in my head. Another one threatened members of my family. These are serious matters. I've been compared to the public intellectuals who helped Hitler come to power. The level of incivility, the level of screaming and yelling on both sides is far, far too great. And the extremes in both parties are gaining more and more power. The left is becoming more hard left on the Democrat side, and the extremists on the right are gaining more influence on the Republican side. And both the United States and Israel thrive at the center. Jews have historically been caught between the red and the black, the red of communism and the black of fascism. And we thrive at the center. We must try to move our politics toward the center and away from extremes. We're not succeeding. And it's a worldwide trend. We're seeing it in Eastern Europe. We're seeing it in many parts of the world. So Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, people like Mike Huckabee and me, have to work together to have conversations, to talk to each other instead of screaming at each other, threatening each other, and refusing to interact with each other. So thank you, Mike, for your great support for Israel and for the United States.
Much of Gaza's 1.8 million people rely heavily on a UN refugee and works agency known as UNRWA. US President Donald Trump has ordered a review and cuts of over 80% of the government's contribution to the UN agency, which provides humanitarian relief to millions of Palestinian refugees. This week reports that his senior advisor, Jared Kushner, has been trying to abolish the agency entirely. Professor Dershowitz, what do you make of the idea of disbanding UNRWA?
I think it's long overdue. I think it should have been disbanded years and years and years ago. There's no place in the United Nations or the international community for a refugee agency which deals with only one problem, a self-inflicted, a self-caused problem, and which exacerbates the problem. UNRWA consists in substantial part of Hamas sympathizers. They are part of the problem, not part of the solution. They have been part of the problem from the very beginning. And the international community has to realize that what is going on in Gaza is a self-inflicted wound. When Israel left Gaza 13 years ago or so, Gaza could have been the Singapore on the Mediterranean. It could have received massive aid. It did receive massive aid from Qatar and other countries. It could have built a wonderful community. Israel left behind some facilities, farming facilities that could have been used, but instead, Hamas overthrew the legitimate leaders, killed many of the members of the Palestinian Authority, established a terrorist state, took the money that was supposed to be used for humanitarian purposes and turned them into terror tunnels and rockets. So if, God forbid, Gaza becomes the humanitarian catastrophe the general says it might become in several years, the international community has to realize this is not Israel's fault. Israel is simply defending itself. The fault lies completely with Hamas, which is starving its people in order to feed its military goals. And those military goals have to change, and military means have to change if Gaza is to treat its 1.8 million people with the kind of dignity and decency that they deserve.
Let's move on now to Syria, where the 7-year-long war has devastated the country, leaving 13.1 million people in need. This week, international efforts are underway in Sochi, Russia, to start drafting a new Syrian constitution. Also on the agenda, refugees and the humanitarian crisis. In the latest happenings on the border with Israel, Syrian government forces took back the largely ruined city of Quneitra from rebel hands and is now tightening its hold on the Syrian sector of the Golan Heights. Israel now closely watching developments there on the border. To discuss some of Israel's involvement and the humanitarian situation, let's introduce today's studio guest, founder and CEO of Israeli Flying Aid, a non-profit volunteer organization that provides life-saving aid in areas of natural disaster and conflict. Gal Lusky, welcome to the show, Gal.
Thank you.
Before we start, let's show a short video from the Israeli Flying Aid, which has a look at the situation inside Syria.
And the world was quiet. No one made a sound of the people's problems. Don't concern us, and the world was quiet. And the world was quiet.
Right, firstly, Gal, tell us a bit about the work that you do and where it happens.
So Israeli Flying Aid is a non-profit volunteer-based Israeli NGO that provides aid and relief to countries that do not have diplomatic relations with Israel and to communities in countries that do not allow the entry of life-saving aid into their territories.
We just had a look at Syria. What would you say are the most critical issues that citizens are facing there?
Well, I think what they face is the world's ignorance. That's the first thing they face, and they have been facing that for the last 7.5 years. I think there's a huge hypocrisy concerning those countries. When it's not concerning Israel, the world is really silent. You couldn't even see any condemnation at the Security Council. It's always a matter of vetoes of the strong countries. And looking into the Security Council Charter at the Chapter 7 and responsibility to protect and understanding, that's what made me decide to establish my own NGO and not support others. I would say, and I would ask Professor Dershowitz, what needs to be done in order to change R2P, responsibility to protect, to the O2P, obligation to protect. And this obligation should concern facts and basic, numbers, and not political agendas and vetoes. And the right of those innocent victims on the field in Syria, for example, women and children and orphans that are facing that horrific situation needs to be taken care by specific numbers and not by, again, political agendas.
Look, I agree completely, and I think Gal deserves to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for the work that she's doing and doing in an unheralded way and taking tremendous risks to help people she doesn't know. But I think she put her finger right on it. I have said for years and written for years that the main victims of the double standard applied to Israel at the United Nations, on university campuses, by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, George Soros, the main victims are not Israelis or Israel. The main victims of the focus on Israel are the people of Syria, the people who used to be victims of genocide in Rwanda and Darfur, Cambodia. The world simply doesn't want to look at the real human rights tragedies that are going on because they prefer to focus only on Israel. If you go on a college campus today and ask your typical ignoramus student or hard left professor about Syria, they'll say, what are you talking about? It's Israel, it's the West Bank. Have you seen what's going on in Ramallah? Have you seen what's going on in Nablus? Do you know what's happening in Hebron, in Gaza, Syria? Where's that? We never heard of it. Rwanda? I don't know what that is. It's Africa. We're not interested in those countries. So the hypocrisy of the so-called human rights movement, which I call the human left's movement, which refuses to focus on real mass killings and mass immigration problems all over the world and uses Israel as the excuse for doing it, has created enormous, enormous problems. Gal is trying to bring those problems to the attention of the world. Every time I speak on a university campus, I speak about Syria. I speak about the other human rights disasters in the world, and the students continue to march only against Israel. Students were more concerned about moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem than they are about the hundreds of thousands of people who were killed, about the use of illegal weapons of war against Syrian civilians, about what's going on with children and mothers, about how Israel is trying to help people who have come across the northern border, even though Syria is an enemy of Israel. This is a story that has to be told, and it's a story that has to be told not only in words but in actions. And Gal is the leader of the actions that are today being taken to help people that are at war, a country that's at war essentially with its own people, as well as not at peace with Israel. So kol hakavod, all the honor goes to Gal and to the people, the brave people who work with her.
Let's bring in our first guest question. It's from Rebecca Gerger, a student originally from North Carolina who lives in Israel and served as a combat soldier in the Israeli army. Take a listen to her question.
Shalom, Professor. Originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, I just finished my government studies here at IDC Herzliya, and of course I read your book, The Case for Israel. We're currently witnessing President Trump's bold decision to tear up the Iran deal and reimpose sanctions. His move is geared to undo a bad deal and restrict Iran's nuclear aspirations. However, the past bad deal failed to address in and of itself core aspects such as preventing Iran from developing missiles and gave it money to spread terrorism worldwide. So do these new sanctions have a chance at succeeding? And how would you compare these external threats to Israel to internal threats that Israel faces within its own society, such as issues on how to deal with the Palestinians and religious differences that pull this country apart, while at the same time seem to cause a rift with world Jewry?
What a great question. And I'm so glad to hear it from you, who came from America and are doing such good things in Israel now. Of course, we all hope for the day when Israel can only have to confront its internal problems, which is serious. The religious issues in Israel are serious. The issues posed by the new law are serious ones. But right now, Israel has to concern itself with existential threats, which primarily consist of the influence of Iran. I don't think anybody doubts that Iran has as its goal the development of a nuclear arsenal. It also has as its goal the destruction of Israel, either through its nuclear weapons or through its surrogates in Lebanon and now Syria. So I was opposed to the Iran deal, and I do think that the imposition of new sanctions on Iran, which start just now, will help bring that country to the realization that it cannot both have a nuclear arsenal and a successful economy. It has to pick one or the other. And indeed, I think the message Israel has sent, that I think the Trump administration has underlined it, unlike the Obama administration, is that it can never develop a nuclear arsenal because Israel will not permit it to. Whatever it takes, Israel will stop it. Whether it takes assassinations or cyber efforts or an all-out war, no prime minister of Israel will accept a nuclear-armed Iran. So once Iran gets the message that it will never be able to develop a nuclear arsenal, I think then it will see reality that at least it should have some economic security, which it will never get while it's seeking to develop these weapons, and also while it is the world's greatest purveyor of terrorism and instability in the Middle East. So the Iranian people are very good people. They have more of a democratic instinct than most other Middle East countries. They crave a time when their religious leaders are something of the past, and when they can live as normal human beings without worrying about the religious police, without worrying about the economic situation. And I hope that in years to come, we will see a stable Iran giving up its nuclear ambitions and trying to restore its status as part of the international community. But to do that, it will have to give up terrorism, hegemony, it will have to give up Hezbollah, and it will have to stop posing threats to Israel, both from Iran itself and from Israel's northern border.
Public Affairs Director for Stand With Us, Gilad Kabilo, joins us now to talk about recent efforts to end discrimination against Israeli chess players. Gilad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Tell us about Liel Levitan and what you would like to ask Professor Dershowitz.
So the story of Liel Levitan is really the story of discrimination against Israelis in worldwide sports. Liel Levitan is a 7-year-old chess champion who recently won the European Schools Chess Championship, earning her a spot in Tunisia in the World Championship. However, Tunisia, as you know, doesn't allow entry to Israelis and has discriminated against Israelis in world sports before. Stand With Us launched a campaign to hold the World Chess Federation accountable for this discrimination and have them demand of Tunisia a commitment to allow Israelis to play. Within a matter of days, hundreds of letters were sent to the World Chess Federation, and they responded by demanding that accountability from Tunisia. 2 days later, the Tunisian Chess Federation capitulated and committed to allow Israelis to play. This is a story that is unprecedented in the accountability of these world sports organizations, not only in chess, and we're seeing it as a larger trend. And what we see from this is that the voices of the people matter, that civil action matters, and through civil action, we can create change against discrimination.
Professor Dershowitz, your response to that?
Well, first of all, Stand With Us is one of the great grassroots organizations in the world today. They have done so much good on college campuses and around the United States and in other parts of the world. I was not aware of the great work that you've been doing in terms of trying to bring equality to the world of chess. Again, Yasher Koach to the work you did, and it's only a beginning. Let's make this a commitment to make sure that no chess match ever occurs anywhere in the world from which Israel is excluded. And I want to congratulate the 7-year-old girl for her prowess in chess. I used to play chess when I was a kid, but I could never win any championships like that. So to have a 7-year-old represent the nation state of the Jewish people. And remember, the world has to know that in Israel, if the chess championship was won by a Druze or an Arab or a Christian or somebody else, they would be representing Israel. This is not a question of only Jews representing Israel in the chess championship. It's a question of any Israeli who's good enough to win the chess championship being able to represent Israel around the world. So I hope she wins, and I hope Israel continues to be able to play in every championship, and I hope Stand With Us continues to do the amazing work it does all over the world. I'm so proud to be identified with Stand With Us. They are such a great organization.
All right, that wraps up this edition of One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. If you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, please go to ILTV.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.